We spoke this week with Jarvis Dortch. He's the executive director of the ACLU of Mississippi. Jarvis, remind viewers about the federal court's ruling on Mississippi's legislative maps and what changes are required there when it comes to the maps.
Yeah, so we, along with several other legal organizations, brought a lawsuit on behalf of the Mississippi NAACP and several other black voters throughout the state, alleging that the state of Mississippi had drawn legislative maps that violated the Voting Rights Act. We had a trial last spring, and we also had a ruling over the summer where the court agreed with us and said the state has to draw 3 new majority black legislative districts, 2 in the Senate, 1 in DeSoto County, 1 in and around Hattiesburg, and in the House they have to draw 1 minority district in and around Chickasaw County.
And what does that do if they draw those maps? How does that impact black voters in the state?
Well, it will give black voters more representation, something that's lacking in these current maps. What the legislature has done over the past 2 cycles is push most of the black voters into a select number of districts, meaning that those districts overwhelmingly are black, but black voters throughout the rest of the state don't have much of a say in what happens in those other districts. So in the Senate, 53% of all black voters are in 15 districts. And the other 37 districts, they're spread out through, the other 43% is spread out through those other 37 districts. So this will make things fair for not just black voters, but all voters to have more say in who represents them at the Capitol.
Yeah, attorneys from your group were part of an effort to propose maps with these new district boundaries, whereas it are impacted. And how did you plot out those changes? How did you come up with those changes and figure out where the changes needed to happen?
Yeah, so many of these maps that we're proposing, we actually presented in trial. So they're not new. They're things that we showed to the court to say, hey, one thing you have to do is show the court that a majority black district can be created, that those communities can be kept intact, and that those voters up there vote together and would be represented if they were in a district that did that. So, you know, DeSoto County is a growing county. The black population there is growing. The population there is growing overall, but you have a county that doesn't have a lot of black representation locally or in the state legislature, and that's because those districts were drawn in a way to prevent those black voters, say, living in Horn Lake to be able to vote for a candidate of their choice. And the same in Hattiesburg, where you see a lot of the black neighborhoods and voters have been taken out of Hattiesburg and represented by a senator that's based in Jasper County. So there's like almost a spike coming down into Hattiesburg just to take those black voters out of Hattiesburg and allowing the rest of the city to be represented by white senators.
Mm-hmm. So by creating more black districts, does it take away from the other existing black districts?
No, and that's one of the things we proved at trial, and that's what the court ordered. They said 2 additional districts in the Senate and 1 additional district in the House. So we have shown at trial and with our maps that you can create a majority black Senate district without collapsing any of the black districts that are in the Mississippi Delta. And the same in the Hattiesburg area. There's a district that I mentioned before that is black majority district. That district can remain a black majority district while creating a new district in the Hattiesburg area that can elect, where black voters can elect a candidate of their choice.
You're a former state representative. Do you have any reason to believe that lawmakers will be receptive to your proposals?
I think they want to follow the law. I would think they want to avoid further litigation. We've heard, that there are lawmakers that have talked about the need to collapse a district in the Delta in order to draw one in DeSoto County. We think we have made the case to as many lawmakers as we can talk to that that's not the case. That we proved that at trial that you don't have to do that, and our maps prove that. So it's our hope they'll put something forward on the Senate and the House side that actually complies with the court order.
What do you say to critics who say that redrawing districts create unnecessary divisions and disrupts existing boundaries?
Well, I mean, we have to redraw districts every 10 years, and I think what you see is the Mississippi legislature in particular has used the redistricting process to make themselves more secure, and that's all members, Democrats, Republicans. They have chosen to build districts where they're more likely to get reelected, and it's them choosing their voters instead of voters choosing them. And when you have districts like that, you have less competitive races. you'll have a situation where there are 122 House districts and only 40 of them have general election races because those elections are over with in the primary. You don't get anything done that way. You don't get debate in the community. You don't get people activated. You don't get voters educated about what's going on in the state because you don't have anybody running that's actually going out there talking to voters because lawmakers have prioritized getting back to the legislature over the voters in Mississippi having a say in what happens at the legislature.
If lawmakers reject your proposal and fail to win court approval for their own maps, then the federal judges will redistrict the lines and they'll decide how those maps are drawn. What do you think is likely to happen here?
Well, the legislature does have the first bite of the apple. They have until the end of the session to present maps and to pass maps. And if we think those maps comply with the court order, we'll agree and go to the court and say we agree that these maps are good, and it's likely that there will be special elections after that. If those maps don't comply with the court order, we'll argue that the legislature has not done what the court said it should do, and further litigation will go forward. And if the court agrees with us, they could draw their own maps and put those in place, and then we would have special elections a little bit later.
If the court has to redraw the lines themselves, what would that optimally look like?
I think we don't want to get too ahead of ourselves, but I think it's going to look at, the court's going to consider what we put forward at trial and look at what their court order says and spend some time drawing maps that comply with that. I think the court itself, though, would like to see the legislature do this and not have it bounce back to them. It would be great for the legislature to take care of this, and I think the order from the court is pretty simple. It's not that complicated. There are 3 districts. These are 3 additional districts. You do not need to play with the maps and collapse a district, meaning you're only giving one additional district, or it's just a wash. That's not what the court ordered, and I don't think the legislature should consider anything like that.
The House and the Senate seem to have different opinions when it comes to redrawing these lines. What does that look like, and what do you think happens at the end of the session here?
From the first few days of the session, we see that the Senate is much more active in this and that they are putting forward proposals and may come up with a map. We would hope that they will put a map out that's public and a map that all voters can see, that we can see before they vote on it, but that's usually not the case in the Mississippi legislature. On the House side, they have indicated that it'll be the end of the session before they do anything. I think it's a little easier for them because it's just one district, and it's probably not that hard to draw that district, and they comply with the court order. So right now we're worried about what the Senate is going to do.
Looking ahead, what steps should the legislature take to ensure that future redistricting processes are equitable and avoid these legal challenges?
I think the process overall should be opened up and be more transparent. Mississippi's process is probably the least transparent in the country. You have lawmakers that have hearings throughout the state that really aren't hearings. They're just public events where people can come in and talk about their concerns. There isn't any record put together about these concerns. There's no response to those concerns. It's just meetings where people can air their thoughts about what the district should look like in their community. Then the legislature goes back to the Capitol and works behind closed doors to create maps. And what we saw in 22, when those maps were passed, those maps came out one evening and were voted on the next morning. You had very little time to see what was going on. And that's not a process that's followed pretty much anywhere in the country. Mississippi's legislature is routinely doing things that are just the opposite of transparent, getting away with stuff that you would not see in another state. Just the transparency part of it, just a bill coming out one day that dramatically changes our tax code and being voted on in the full House the next day. You don't see that in other states.
Jarvis Dortch, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
All right.